Why, hello class. So in this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about your final assignment for this class, which is due the week of finals, it feels weird to say that because we're not actually going to be on campus for finals, but what would have been your finals week? And I'm sure for some of you, you're still going to be taking finals. But anyway, so the final assignment, if you look on your syllabus, is the ePortfolio and reflection. Now, for many of you, you probably took English 103 here at NIU. And for those of you, this is going to be a familiar assignment. So the purpose of the ePortfolio is to sort of showcase what you think are some of your best works. There are a few different categories. There's analysis, I believe, working with sources, and just what you think is your best work, I think, or genre. I really need to look this up. It's in the prompt. So look at your prompt because my memory's terrible and I just can't remember. Hey class, Editing Marilyn here. I double checked what those categories are, and they are analysis, writing with sources, and audience and genre. These categories are dictated by the English department, not by me, if that's not clear, by the fact that I cannot remember. So basically, you are going to choose works that you have written. Now, for those of you who have been here at NIU, you can actually use papers from your English 103 experience as well, but try and use at least one writing example from 203 in it. But you can draw from your English 103 if you were here on campus doing your first portion of this class. So that'll give you a little bit of a wider pool of works that you can choose from to display in your ePortfolio. So basically what you're going to do is for each of those categories, the ones that I can't remember off the top of my head, you're going to choose one writing assignment that you've done that you think demonstrates your ability to do the thing indicated in the categories. So if, for example, one of the categories is writing with sources, then you might choose to use your research paper, right? Because your research paper, in essence, demonstrates your ability to write with sources. Of course, that's assuming that you did it correctly and had like a literature review and whatever, right? But I'm assuming those of you did fine. You're gonna have those things, right? So again, for each of those categories, after you figure out how to do those things, I am going to have you set up an ePortfolio in Blackboard. I'm going to add another video that shows you how to set this up in Blackboard and how to submit your ePortfolio to me. Now, the last piece, the last thing that you are going to need to make sure that you have in the ePortfolio is that second part of this final assignment, which is your reflection. So the reflection is sort of its own like part two of the ePortfolio assignment. In that prompt, you'll notice that there are like two parts. One of them is the ePortfolio. The second part, or I might have that flipped, but the second of the two parts that exists is going to be the reflection. So for the reflection, what you're going to do is think back about the things that you've learned in this class. And a good way to do that is to sort of review the assignments that we've done and the skills that you needed to have to complete those assignments. So you can also sort of think back to your English 103 class too and draw a little bit of information from that, but this should primarily be your experience in English 203, but you could also sort of use your experience in English 103 to sort of talk about how this class perhaps expanded upon some of the skills that you learned there and whatever. So keep that in mind. So let's go over really quickly what the assignments were for this class. So the first writing example that you had was the media use essay. So for that, after you guys turned in your draft, I gave you guys a bunch of feedback and spent a whole class talking about grammar and technical issues. We talked about APA and quoting things and citations and whatever. So those are like very solid writing skill things that hopefully you guys learned in the course of that assignment, right? But there are also some periphery things that aren't necessarily related to the writing process in the way that you would probably think a writing class would be, right? You have some sort of tangential skills or sort of like periphery skills that you might have gotten from it as well. One of the things that you did in the first couple of weeks of class is I had you read some excerpts from, or at least one excerpt from Kevin Williams's book about media theory, right? So, that's something that you probably learned as well, is like, a little bit of introductory material about media studies, right? So you can kind of think about this reflection as containing information about both, sort of solidly writing skills and sort of like periphery knowledge that, you used to sort of inform the writing process. After the media use essay, we went on to the comparative source analysis. So the comparative source analysis, we learned a couple of things. We learned about objective summaries. For some of you, that might have been like kind of a repeat skill from your English 103 or the tail end of English 103. For others of you, this might have been a new thing. And then there's also the like evaluative summary, right? So we were evaluating sources, trying to be able to vet whether or not a source is reliable, whether the information in it is worthy of our time and placement in our academic texts, right? So we did this through evaluating the author and the publication it came out of, the dates of the work, among a variety of other things, right? The ethos, logos, pathos, so their rhetorical use of rhetorical devices, etc. Right? So you can kind of revisit that. The next thing we talked about was, or kind of in relation to that, was sort of how to organize a paper and kind of what kind of sections you should have in there, right? We had a class in lab when we were still getting together personally, right? Where we talked about the sections that you'd probably want to include, right? Your introduction and methods to talk about how you gauged the reliability of sources, the body of your work or discussion, and then, from there, the conclusion, etc., right? We also talked a bit about APA formatting, sort of in between there, like in between the media use essay and the comparative source analysis, and how to quote and create a references page and but the references page and sort of a title page, abstract, and sort of the pieces of that, and how to create parenthetical quotations versus like the citations in your references page, etc. Right? So those are some skills as well. From there, we sort of started the research paper. So first you had your proposal. So you kind of got insight into how to organize your time and to think about how to sort of put together or ask an effective research question. You learned sort of throughout the process what the different kinds of primary research are, how to look at the library to find materials. There was that week that we had the library orientation online. And then there was, after the proposal, you had your annotated bibliography. For a lot of you, that might have been the first time you've ever done something like that, where you were just sort of summarizing and succinctly putting together how that particular source might play into the research that you're doing. From there, you did your literature review, where you were sort of taking the taking all of the information that you got from your secondary source materials, so the stuff from your annotated bibliography plus a couple more sources potentially, and sort of creating a context for your own research, talking about what has already been said about this topic and those that are sort of on the periphery or related to it, and sort of providing your audience some ideas about what scholars are saying, comparing and contrasting what they have to say. Some might be older studies that have something different to say than more modern studies about the same thing, and sort of sifting through everything to sort of give your audience a good idea of what the most important information that they need to know is, and how that might relate to your later research later in the paper. Then we went on to the paper itself. Now, in the midst of all of that, you also learned other skills, right? Like how to use Qualtrics, right? So that's kind of one of those periphery skills we were talking about. You learned how to sort of sift through data after you get it from Qualtrics. You learned about observation logs. We talked a little bit about that, I believe, before spring break, about how you sort of organize that and whatever. You also learned sort of how to organize a paper again through the research paper, but a little bit more in depth, because this research paper was a little bit more structured than, say, the comparative source analysis. Then I think there's potentially argument to be made that you're going to learn how to use the ePortfolio function if you haven't already. You're also going to learn how to do some PowerPoint stuff after this week, how to do the dictation, things like that. So some of those, again, more periphery skills, right? I want you to sort of think about through your the process of taking this class, and for those of you who also took 103, like that class as well, how has your progression gone as a writer? Now, of course, the elephant in the room is obviously this semester did not go as planned. We're all kind of in the middle of this weird thing where we are having to socially distance, and that was not the plan for this semester, right? And for some of you who ended up having to sort of do this class online, including me, this was a bit of a challenge for us, right? And for some of us, this may have felt as though this sort of impeded our ability to learn as much as we maybe would have in a more traditional setting, and whatnot. So that's definitely something that you can consider as you are writing your reflection. And I encourage you to, because like I say, this is sort of unprecedented, right? We might have like a couple snow days here or there because, we're in the Midwest and all, but being out of school for the last like half of the semester and having to sort of resort to this strange new world of online learning, is a little different and not quite what we expected. So it's okay if you want to sort of address how you feel that might have impacted your learning, and whatnot from this class, because it is what it is. So again, watch out for the video where I teach you how to put up your ePortfolio, and I'll probably talk a little bit more in more exact terms about some of that stuff as I'm putting up together the video, showing you how to do the ePortfolio. Okay. So on the ePortfolio then, and the reflection, that's that final piece that will be due during finals week. Again, I will remind you of the due dates and stuff like that, probably via announcement on Blackboard. So hopefully this is helpful in sort of at least getting you ready for the ePortfolio and reflection. The prompt and whatnot should now be on Blackboard, so you guys can look through that and kind of see some of the things I'm referencing here, right? So if you have any questions about this or anything like that, please feel free to let me know, and I'll address your questions as they come up. Okay. So I guess with that, I'll just say, I'll see you later. Bye.